Dave, I'm excited to have you here. Yeah,
No, happy to be here.
yeah. It was really cool when I met you. Gosh, I think it was 9 years ago when you were a congressman, and we were able to come over to your office and sit down with you. And my first instinct of you, which I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character, was how kind and genuine you were. And it's easy to feel that with you, and that always stuck with me. And I know it sounds crazy, but it just through time in the last 9 years, I've always been, I've thought about that because it's pretty cool to sit down with a congressman as a young 20-year-old or what was like 28-year-old punk kid. But I really appreciated your respect and how genuine you were, allowing us into your office and being able to talk about renewable energy.
I appreciate that. I think that just really all comes from a place in your heart where, if you're a person of faith, you just your whole approach to life is everybody is I firmly believe this, we're all God's children, and we should all be respecting each other.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm always a nice guy.
Yeah.
When I was a cop, there was the easy way and the hard way.
Yeah. I think there's so much truth to that, and continuously as we interview people in the studio here, I hear that every time, and I love it. It's, I think we're so divided right now, and I think that's one thing I hope we get back to is more faith being, I guess, projected in homes and things like that, because when you have faith and you realize you're a part of that community, you realize how truly amazing everybody really is. Like everybody has a gift. Everybody has something that they're given, a God-given talent or skill or mindset. And if we, can connect across the sides, whether it's left or right or whatever, we really have so much in common, especially that we're all God's children. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, everybody's got a story too, When you run for office, you're telling your story. People want to know about you, and it's one of the hardest things when you get into a public office is to talk about yourself. I found that very, very difficult in the beginning, but then as I was more and more drawn into sort of pushed into the public eye, I realized that people kept asking and asking and asking, and so it's part of my responsibility now to let people know who I am, because then they make a decision based upon that.
Yeah, I think that jumps us into how I wanted to start this. I think, I've done some research on, you have a Wikipedia page and people can find out great information about you. And I was wondering if we could start about your personal experiences that led you into your life has really been of service to not only, the country and the community around you, like true dedication that really is probably unmatched by many. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your youth and what led you into a life of service.
Well, essentially I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and I grew up in the Renton Highlands. People over here won't know the Renton Highlands, but it's back in the day, they were 900 square foot homes built in the early 1950s, and they were built for people who worked at Boeing or Pacific Car and Foundry, which was a steel mill, which is now Kenworth Trucking. So those were just blue collar, hard-working, mostly men. The women back in those days, were taking care of the kids at home, and they were housewives, and most of them didn't work as a one job families back in the 50s. But my dad started working at Pacific Car and Foundry, and then we lived in a 900 square foot cement block home with 9 people. The boys slept in the garage. My youngest brother, who's 11 years younger, slept in a crib in the closet in my parents' room, and then the 2 sisters slept in the other room. So, it was pretty slim pickings.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And I can remember my dad, back then they called it the hawk shop. Young people probably have no idea what a hawk shop is, but it's a pawn shop.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to make ends meet, we used to go to the hawk shop and hawk things from the house to pay the electric bill or buy gas to get to work, or maybe we had a flat tire and had to buy back then. In those days, you could buy retread tires.
Yeah, retreads. Yeah,
Yeah, can't do that anymore. But we didn't know we were not well off. We were, we were eating puffed rice and powdered milk, and went to the food bank a couple of times down in Seattle to get some of the staples, flour, sugar, that kind of stuff, salt. But then we moved to Kent, went to Kent Meridian High School. My parents didn't get along very well. Big domestic violence activity over my childhood. I would describe it as pretty violent.
Yeah.
To the point where I made a couple of trips to the hospital from injuries, and then one particular day it was just too much, and I packed my stuff up in a 1956 Mercury, threw it all in the trunk, and parked in a dead-end road down pretty close to where my friend Phil lives, which is also pretty much dead-ended right about where the Green River is running through the middle of the Kent Valley. So, but I went back and forth to the house checking on my brothers and sisters. I had a job. I was playing sports. I like to joke. I'm dyslexic too, by the way, so school is hard for me. So I like to joke that why did I? You think back and why you made certain decisions, and your young listeners will learn as they grow older, they'll go, why did I make this decision?
Yeah.
And look what happened when I made this decision. So I decided to keep going to school, and basically it was to play, sports, and that's really what kept me in.
Yeah.
At Kent Meridian High School, but girls was another good reason to go back.
Yeah, yeah, especially when you're playing sports at a big school. There's some opportunity there.
Yeah, he was the running back and I was the quarterback.
Oh, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So, that is wild. So I'm thinking, you ended up leaving. What was it? How old were you at this time? Like 16?
16.
16?
Yeah.
What was the driving factor for you for your personal, I would say, was it a personal respect thing, or did people support you and say, Dave, you got to get out of here?
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
Mm-mm.
Man, that's something. That's an incredible choice to make at such a young age, to do that.
Yeah.
But maybe for you, the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So after you played sports through high school, you ended up playing sports in college, and you went to school for, was it social justice or social work?
Well, yeah, it started out, my grandfather wanted me to be, he was a Lutheran pastor, so kind of odd, they were living in Minnesota. They had no idea what was going on in the family. And the neighbors, sort of knew, because my mom would end up with some bruises, but back then you didn't talk about that. You didn't call the cops. And later on, as we got older, the cops were called in Kent. My dad was taken to jail and to the hospital, and I was taken to the hospital, and so it was just different back then. But you just move on. I did play a couple of years. Played football and basketball at Concordia. My grandfather wanted me to be a Lutheran pastor.
Okay, yeah.
And I took 2 years of German, saw my roommates taking Greek and Hebrew, and I said, that's not happening. Right? No. But I knew I wanted to help people. That's the deal that really drove me. I knew I wanted to make a difference. I knew I wanted to help. I think part of that was being the older brother. I like to tell stories. I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
Debates are hard for me because they give you a minute 15, a minute 30, and I'm a guy who doesn't speak in sound bites, as
Right.
you can tell from this interview here. I tell stories,
Yeah.
and stories with lessons and meaning behind
Yeah.
them, and you know, from my own experiences. So I helping my brothers and sisters through all that, and just helping some of the neighborhood kids. I just felt like I needed to get into a field where I could make a difference and
Right.
help. So I first joined the Air Force, did about 7 months active duty, came out, started taking tests right away. Very hard for me to pass these tests. Back in the day, in the late '60s and early '70s, these were read and write and arithmetic tests. So civil service tests had nothing to do with being a cop. It was all read and write and arithmetic.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about dyslexia, arithmetic and reading are very difficult.
Right.
I found writing pretty easy, except for my spelling wasn't too good. Words came maybe pretty easy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I took the test for King County, and I got veterans preference, and ended up number 82 out of 110 people. They hired 110.
Yeah.
And I was not at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So I'm just, for young people listening, you don't have to be number one all the time. You just got to be in a place to put yourself in the game.
I like that. I like that a lot. I wanted to touch on a few things on that. The beauty of podcasting is you get to tell your story. It's not short form information, because you're not going to figure out who somebody is in these debates over a 1 minute answer, because there's so much more to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more to that. And I think we're ignorant to think that you're going to figure out, who somebody is or what their values are just from a quick answer.
Right.
And so I appreciate that, and especially appreciate you being able to sit here and tell us these stories today, because you got some good ones. Do you think your empathy came from your situation as being an older sibling and taking care of your siblings? And because I don't know, I see empathy from you when I hear your answers on the debate stage. In your stories already, I can feel that you're a very empathetic person. Is there any truth to that, or?
Well, I probably has something to do with it, but I think that, God gives people gifts,
Yeah.
and I think that's maybe one of mine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think so.
I just do it.
Yeah. Maybe it comes with the name Dave. I don't know.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah. So you end up 82nd in your class getting into law enforcement. And for how long were you in the field until you became a detective?
I spent a year in jail as a guard, not as an inmate.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did about 5 years on the street. During that 5 years, first couple of years, I went to a domestic violence call and ended up saving a woman who was when I got to the call, the husband was in the front room, had a knife to her throat, and was going to slit her throat. I snuck in, was able to distract him, grabbed her, threw her out the window. He jumped me, fight was on. I fell over a coffee table in the living room. He slit my throat 3 times, and I think 40-some stitches. And the last move he made, I was on my back, and he went to stab me right in the center of I grabbed the handle in his hands and stopped. I have a little U-shaped scar right on my Adam's apple where the tip of
It hit it.
Yeah, just the tip of the blade was just scratching it right here, and had a couple of stitches in this, but it went all the way from around here. I was cut here and sliced on my shoulder. This shirt has metal in the collar, so it didn't cut through to the skin here. But he slashed me 2 times on the shirt collar. Fortunately, those didn't go deep into, and then 2 times on my shoulder.
What was going through your mind? I mean, did you have?
Yeah, I was going.
I mean,
like, this is really real life. This isn't TV cop shit.
yeah, yeah.
Can I say that, man?
Oh yeah, you can say whatever you want around here. Oh, yeah.
I just you know, when I felt the blood flowing down my chest inside my shirt, I said, the quote is, "You stabbed me, you asshole."
Right.
And he says, "Yeah, that's right. I'm going to kill you."
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had some backup that showed up, but kicked the door in and yanked him off me, and he went off to jail, and I went to the hospital. But
Right.
the thing is, I met my wife in college too. Like the first 2 weeks I was there, we met,
Yeah.
and we got married right after we finished the 2 years of college, and when I came home that night, my neck was, I mean, it was swollen up out to here, black and blue, and I got some photos that I didn't bring with me. It probably gross you out, but she never once said, "I don't want you doing this job anymore," because she knew it was my passion,
Yeah.
what I wanted to do. So she was always there. Even then, moving forward, went into homicide and robbery, and did that for about 3 years, and then ended up being assigned the first body in the Green River case. And then for 9 years with the task force, with the team, we collected bodies weekly.
Yeah.
We collected scores and scores and scores of dead bodies of little girls and young women. And, so part of what I did is I became an expert in processing outdoor crime scenes and recovering dead bodies. And so, I would travel to Canada, Oregon, Montana, Idaho, California, teach classes, do their outdoor crimes scenes if they didn't, if they called us and thought it might be connected, or they just needed some help.
Right. That's wild. It's absolutely wild that I think it's wild that you ended up parking at the Green River.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah.
And then you full turn, you come back around there, and here you are trying to bring justice to these victims. And that was your mission. I mean, I've seen you on documentaries or docuseries and other things. And I think that if people get a chance to watch those, your dedication to that, I think it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. Because it was, I don't know if it could be, I guess, tested or matched at the level of dedication that you and your team had for that. And at that time, there wasn't the technology, there wasn't the communication pathways that there are now. I mean, what the level of effort, could you describe, the level of effort or the passion that you and your team had and where it came from?
Yeah, I think the thing to remember too is that, if you don't have a team, if you don't have a family, you're not going to be successful. You can't do life on your own. You just can't do life by yourself.
Yep, we say that in here all the time. This whole thing about, I don't know if it's a trend or what's going on out here in the social media world where everybody thinks it's respectable if you show that, oh, you're independent. Oh, I'm this independent person. And I constantly tell people, like, nobody is independent, truly independent. You might have strong will, you might have dedication and dreams and vision, but we're so entangled in this world, that you have to help each other out. You have to be a community to achieve your dreams. And I think there's nothing better than when you receive support from somebody to help you on a common mission.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, I mean, people, they say they're independent, but so are you really independent if you're following a trend to be independent?
Isn't that true? Dependent on the independent trend.
Right, exactly. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. So we're all independent, but we're separate, but we're all doing independent together.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but I mean, you cannot do life by yourself. You've got to have people in your life that care about you, that hold you up, and not only that's, more importantly, that you help hold up. And I think that's actually more rewarding than than having them help you. It's you helping them, and I mean that's the reason that my friend Phil, who's with us today, he became a firefighter. He leads prayer groups and drive-through prayer, and that's the reason I became a cop. That's the reason I went to Congress. It's the reason I went to Central America. It's the reason I'm doing this job, because it's just really good to give.
Yeah.
And I mean,
There's nothing better.
good to get too, but
Yeah. Well, and I think
Right.
it comes with that. You know, it's kind of it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I know that that's, you talk about things coming full circle, and when the guy that introduced me to you, 9 years ago, this was just a dream of mine that I had just started right then. I was like, someday I'm going to do this. And then, here to have you sitting here with me again, just because I reached out to him and said, who's his campaign manager?
Yeah.
And of course he was like, this is his name and number right here, and if it wasn't for him having that same mindset, I wouldn't have you here, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to hear your story and your values and also your character that would be just so incredible for Washington State to have, especially as the leader at the top. So I think that's
we're
so
praying
true.
for that.
Well, we're going to do whatever we can. Yeah. Going back to when you were a detective, there's this scenario where you knew you had him. As far as you knew, it was Gary Ridgeway.
Yeah.
And you went and you tore his property up and down. How could you walk us through your mission or your mentality during that operation and after?
So we had, just to give you the scope of the case, we had over 40,000 tip sheets, and we had collected over 10,000 items of evidence. Now, we didn't have computers.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that's like your young listeners are going to go, wait a minute, how you live in a world without computers? Yeah. We used a Rolodex file, which is, I don't know if you guys even know what a Rolodex, do you? Old farts, you are then. You can take they're just a spindle.
Yep.
And 3x5 note cards, and we would list suspects and priority ABC. We'd list license plate numbers, whatever. So we had several of those, and you'd just go through the 3x5 cards looking for the info. 1986 got our first computer. It was called a VAX computer. It was a computer that took up the entire. It would take up the size of a school classroom.
Yeah.
And it could not correlate information. It could only hold information. You could ask for the information that you put into it to be returned back to you on a printout that was was a printout about this big with perforated sides, and it folded in like an accordion, and we would take those out. So, for example, we had a list of people who drove pickup trucks because those were suspect vehicles. We had a list of people who had fishing license because of the Green River, and it was a very popular steelhead fishing river. And then three, everyone who's been arrested for assaulting any woman, not just someone on the street, but any female assault. We had all those arrests, and we had hundreds of lists like that. But we'd take 3 of those lists at a time, lay them out the length of a school hallway, because we occupied a vacant junior high school back then, middle school today. And then we would have detectives on those lists with highlighters. We'd call out a license plate, and somebody would look. They'd go up and down those sheets to see if it appeared on more than one sheet. And then we would do birth dates and addresses, and if any one of those appeared on 3 of the sheets, then they would be a priority A suspect. If it was just on 2 of the printouts, then you'd be a B, one, and a C. So that's how we did it in the beginning, and then eventually, of course, now everything is all the files are computerized. But we didn't know. We worked tip sheets priority A, and we had a young lady come in who said she escaped from him. He became a suspect rather quickly, but we had a lot of prostitutes come in and say, we escaped from this guy, we escaped from that guy. I was after working that case, I was amazed that women could go from point A to point B. There's so many
Yeah.
fruitcakes out there. Ladies, you need to keep your eyeballs peeled and your head on a swivel so you can be safe out there. Or always have somebody with you. So we searched his house, but we searched the houses of other suspects too, and we didn't collect any information, any evidence really, from his yard, from his house that day. The only evidence we collected that became important later on was connected to, and the first bodies that I was assigned were found in the Green River. They had bodily fluid in them that we were able to collect. The medical examiner collected them. We froze them, and 82.
Yeah.
In 87, we searched his house. We were able to, in the search warrant, take swabs of his cheek. We asked the judge if we could take blood typing, a blood sample.
Yeah.
And he said, too invasive, you can't. And so we just took swabs. We froze the swabs in 87, searched his house, didn't find anything, and continued on with the case. And then in 1998 or so, DNA evidence had really come to a point where we thought, okay, the scientists were telling us we could compare your 82 sample and 87 sample. In 1999, we found a lab on the East Coast, took it there. They said, man, this is very fragile evidence, very minute. We don't want to mess with it right now. Let's wait a few months and wait for the science to get better. In 2001, finally March, we get a phone call from the lab. We can do this. We put the evidence in, and in 2001 March, they started to do their testing. It took until September of 2001 before we knew that the two samples had matched.
Yeah.
So
Can you tell us how that went down? Because what'd they do? They got rid of your funding, right? In between that time frame.
they closed they closed the
right?
case down in 1990. So I started my first prostitute murder was in January of 1982. Leanne Wilcox, 16-year-old girl, found just South King County. And then Wendy Caulfield was found on July 15th, 1982. And that was a Kent case. And so I started working with Kent from my January case to their July case, thinking they were connected. We thought they might be because they were cousins. We figured that out. But then on August 12th, Debbie Bonner was found. And so then we were immediately, included all three of them. Then on August 15th, Cynthia Hines, Opal Mills, and Marcia Chapman were found. I actually found Marcia Chapman's body on the bank as I was working my way down to look at the other bodies that were in the river. And so that's how the whole thing started. And the very next day, this was on a Sunday, on Monday, we met and we put together a task force of 25 people. And then that went to the end of 1982. And then in 83, end of 1982, actually, I was left alone with the case. They put me in a separate room until I ended up with 13 bodies. By the end of 1983, we had 13 bodies, and we didn't even know it yet.
Yeah.
And new sheriff came in and said, okay, we're going to put a task force back together, enhanced task force. January 84, that happened. We collected body after body after body, sometimes 6-7 bodies in a week. And then the end of March 1990, there were 3 of us left. 2 of them went to major crimes to work on other cases, but they continued to monitor because people still called in tips.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I got promoted. It was a hard day to leave after 9 years of collecting bodies, and the thing was shut down.
Yeah.
And they did want to get rid of the evidence, and I said, no, man, this case could someday be solved. You can't do that. So they stored it all in one place, and fortunately for us, they kept that evidence. And I went out to Burien White Center and worked there as a sergeant on graveyard shift. But what I did a lot of my time out there, there was a lot of activity in that district, high crime area.
Yeah.
And but I made sure that I got time to go by the sites where he had dumped the bodies.
I bet you were always looking.
all over the place, yeah.
Oh, it's wild.
Yeah.
And then you were elected sheriff what year?
And then I was promoted. And then what happens is in 1996, the people of King County decide that they want an elected sheriff. And so our sheriff says, I'm not running for election. And he left and went to Bellevue PD to be the police chief. And so he did that in 1997, the year that we'd have to have a sheriff run. And in 1996 in December, well, I'll back up. In 1990, I had a head-on car crash in my police car. Guy came up over a hill, hit me at 60, and I was doing 40. I ended up with back surgery and off 6 months, went back to work. 1996, I was a major at a precinct in Kenmore. And in December of 96, my right foot quit working. So I went to the doctor, and he says, man, we got to do surgery tomorrow, otherwise you're going to have permanent nerve damage. I got the surgery done. He says, I don't know if you're going to be able to get your use of your right foot back. And I knew if that didn't happen, I couldn't go back to work, no matter what rank you are. The retirement system that I was in back then, you had to do the whole job. So I was looking in the want ads in December of 96. I was looking for a job because I didn't know if I was going to be going back to work. But I kept working on my toes and my feet and kept praying, and my legs started working. I'm still numb from here down. The bottom of my right foot is still numb, but I still, work out and
yeah,
do
that's
the
for
things
sure.
that I can do. But here's what happens. This is how God works. I come back to work in late February of 1997. 2 weeks later, in March, early March, I get a phone call. Hey, we just put from one of the chiefs. We just put your name in for to the executive's office, the county executive, to be considered for sheriff. And I thought they were joking.
Yeah.
I start laughing, and they go, "No, we did." So I said, "Well, whatever."
Yeah.
On Saturday, I get a phone call that I'm supposed to be at an interview on Monday to be the sheriff. So I show up on Monday. I'm interviewed. On Tuesday morning, I get a call. The executive wants to meet with me for dinner on Tuesday night in Kenmore. So I have dinner. He walks in, sits down, and he says, I really enjoyed the interview that we had. I want to offer you the job of sheriff. Will you take it? I said, okay.
Yeah.
So he says, well, you have to run.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I had no idea. Look, I've been a cop. I grew up in the Renton Highlands. I struggled through high school, and all of a sudden, I'm the sheriff of the biggest county in the state,
Yeah.
the 12th largest county in the country.
Yeah.
And so the very next morning, I was standing there. I was sworn in as the sheriff, and so I was the sheriff of King County in 1997. But he did ask me before he left. He said, "So wait a minute, are you a Democrat or a Republican?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
He said, "Good answer. You're going to do just fine." Well, people wonder. Okay, here's a guy been around a while. He's in politics. He must be rich. He must have been born with a silver spoon.
Yeah.
Must have gone to Harvard. No, I didn't do any of those things. God had a plan in my life. I ended up as the sheriff. That's how I got in. I had ran for sheriff. That's how I got into politics.
Yeah.
And I didn't raise my hand to do it. I was chosen.
Yeah.
And so I did. And boy, we had some tough decisions during those sheriff's years. I had a guy who killed his mother and nephew, and sped down southbound on a Labor Day weekend on the freeway, ran over a guy on a motorcycle. We thought he was dead. He lost his legs. The guy crashes his car after he hits the motorcycle, jumps the fence, beats an elderly woman to death with a shovel, goes next door, smacks another lady over the head with a rake, breaks her neck. We think she's dead. She survives, breaks into a house, shoots up the neighborhood. Police car shows up. She gets shot. Bullet goes through the windshield of the police car, flattens out, smacks against her head flat,
Oh my gosh.
and ricochets off and goes up into the headliner of the car. It knocks her out. Instead of coming straight in,
Yeah.
she'd have been dead, but that windshield angled the round so it went at an angle and skipped off her skull. So we didn't know, though, that at the time. We see her laying in the front seat bleeding. So we rescue her. First of all, I'm in my office in Seattle, get a call, barricaded guy up there, shot a cop, one of our cops, and I'm screaming all the way up there. I shut down I-5 on Labor Day weekend. I mean, traffic was like backed up to Vancouver, Canada, all the way to south to Vancouver, Washington, right? And so I get there, and I am apprised of the situation. The guy is still shooting. I got 5 cops who are pinned down, 2 police cars riddled with bullet holes. And so I told my SWAT team guys, I said, my snipers, if you get a shot, you got to take him out.
Yeah.
He raises up his head and pot shots at a couple of my cops, and a sniper took him out. So I went to the parking lot, the nearby parking lot where all the media had gathered, and they had plenty of time to get there because this had gone on for hours. I mean, I had a parking lot full of media people.
Oh, I bet.
And so the first question I'm asked is, Sheriff, this must have been like the hardest decision you've ever made in your entire career. And for a moment, I thought about it, and I said, no, it really wasn't. This is what you trained me to do, right? I mean, the politically correct answer is, do we ever want to kill anybody? No. We're here to protect people, but every now and then, you've got to make a tough decision to save lives. And that's one of the things that the point I tried to make last night without being able to tell this story is that, you know what, if you want to be a leader, you got to be able to make the tough decisions. Yeah. And then when you make the tough decisions, then and people start to criticize you for them, you got to take responsibility for it. And that's what I did. WTO, that's another big thing that hit us when I was the sheriff, 500,000 people in the streets of Seattle.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
I was told by the mayor and the police chief, I was a big blow up between the two of us. We don't need you. We don't want you. So we can handle this. It's not going to be a problem. And I said, he invited people to come down and witness the First Amendment right being expressed.
Was that like 98, 99?
That was 99.
99, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I got on the radio right after him, and I said, please don't come to Seattle because this is going to be a riot. And he called me and was very upset with me that I did that because it was his city, not mine.
Yeah.
But we have concurrent jurisdiction, right? So he said, well, I don't want your people in my town. And I said, okay. So I put 350 deputies in the courthouse basement at 3rd and James, downtown Seattle, on Sunday. On Monday afternoon, I got a phone call from the chief because all hell had broken loose. Yeah. And I opened up the garage doors. I marched out 350 deputies. Yeah. And they took, they kicked butt. And by that I mean they didn't brutalize anyone. They started arresting people. They held people accountable and responsible for their actions. They were burning dumpsters, flipping cars over, and doing all those things. So
I remember that because I was 12 years old, living in Eatonville, just south of Seattle, south of Puyallup up there. And it's one of those moments I remember on the TV, back before cell phones where everybody's sending everything out. So your curiosity as a kid's like, that's like one of the biggest things you've heard of at that age is like, what in the world's going on?
Yeah.
And it was like, don't go into Seattle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I had one of the things, this is a lesson that I use in some of my speeches. I might even give it this story tonight. If you don't think that your action, that one person can make a difference. Listen to this story. I mean, it really alerted me and woke me up to, there were other stories that like I could relate to, but this one is powerful for me anyway. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and another God plan thing.
Some divine intervention.
Yeah, I was in the back seat of Ron Sims' county executive car. My detective was the driver, was his security. We provided security for the executive. And when I was in the car showing him what was going on downtown, call came across the radio. Somebody's broken into the Radio Shack. I told Ross Nooney, the detective, take me to the Radio Shack. No one else can go. They're all tied up with 500,000 rioters. So he took me. I jumped out. I chased these guys. There happened to be the 4 guys that somebody yells, the cops are coming. And I'm thinking, I'm looking around, well, I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Right? They're looking at me and they see me coming and they start to run. I'm 49 years old at the time. I'm chasing 18-year-old kids down the street. I know I'm not going to catch them. I'm surprised I didn't pull a hamstring, chasing them. But they get caught later. But there's a King 5 camera right there filmed me, and it's all over the news. And so here's the funny part of the story. About a month later, I get an email from a Tacoma police officer who says, hey, Sheriff, you need to know this. Here's what happened to me. I went to India to trace my family tree, and I was in the high mountains of India. I found the village where my family originated from. And I was talking to the villagers through an interpreter, and they said, where are you from? And he said, I told them Seattle, Washington, because I didn't think they would know where Tacoma was. And so they said, oh, you're from Seattle, Washington. What do you do there? He says, well, I'm a police officer. And they looked at him and they said, well, they got all excited. He said, do you know the great sheriff from Seattle?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, how do you know the sheriff from Seattle?
Yeah.
It's like it's a village in the mountains of India. And they're talking about the sheriff from Seattle, and he's like flabbergasted. And they said, well, he's a great leader. And he's very puzzled. And then they show him that they have one satellite dish and they have one TV.
Yeah.
And they were watching WTO, and they watched me chasing these crooks down the street and determined through that vision that I was a leader. But I'm not a leader. I was only doing my job.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing I think, for people to really remember that, picking up a scrap of paper or here's the most important thing. You have to vote. If you tell me that you don't think your vote matters, you're nuts.
Yeah.
It does matter. That one little act of me doing my job impressed those people so much that they had to share that story with some guy they'd never seen before. Right. And they were talking about it in India.
Yeah.
So we've got to remember that everything that we do, people are watching, your neighbors are watching, your kids are watching, and you set an example for people. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And for that honor to vote, that privilege to vote, somebody died. A lot of people
died, yeah.
A lot of people died. A lot of people have come home disabled, missing limbs, eyesight, hearing, you name it. And all we're asking, you don't have to die. You don't have to lose an arm. We're just asking you to take your ballot that was mailed to your house, pick up a pen, and go like this.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just did it with right next to your name
a
few months ago. And I made a little video. I was like, hey, this is how you vote. And I put intellectually.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I made a video. It's like intellectually. Yeah. No, I love that you bring that up. And I would call that a leader. In my generation, the way we've kind of now see leaders is for a while, I think it was misconstrued where people like, oh, a manager is a leader or a boss is a leader or the CEO. But I think it's now with I think with social media and the way we can spread those videos very quickly, there's those moments. It's if you inspire somebody, you're considered a leader now. Just that little bit of inspiration, and I wonder if that comes from other cultures view it that way more than I think America has in the past. I work with people from all over the world, and this isn't my full time job. This is my passion project.
Yeah.
But I work in tech, and and you get these little stories. You said a few things today that come from different cultures where they talk about giving. There's so many other cultures that have a lot lower mental health problem.
Yeah.
And it's because they give all the time within their communities. Their communities are so entangled. And then they also give back to the elderly, which that's our project here, is to give the elderly a voice. And they're the ones that are going to tell us, not that you're elderly, but
I'm elderly.
You hit the threshold. but it gives that we need to hear that voice, because we're going to learn those lessons and the power of a vote. Yeah. It touches, I think, those generations a lot more now, where we're lazy with it. And I also think you owe your neighbors a vote. Like with me, I owe my neighbors because I represent them. And you also represent your kids that can't vote. And that's the most important thing to me, is that I owe my kids to do my research and make sure that vote is done in the favor of their future.
Yeah.
And
one of the things that my friend Phil does, who's here, as I said, and my sister does, and Phil's brother does, if they're in the supermarket and they hear somebody say, "Holy smokes, look at this, what a gallon of milk costs today." She says, my sister will go, "You know how you can change that?" And they'll go, "How?" "Well, you got to vote for somebody different."
Yep.
"Well, what do you mean?" "Well, you got to vote for my brother, Dave Reichert."
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
And then maybe we can get some changes made, And that's how you get, the word of mouth going too. And I know social media is a big way to do that today. It's the thing. I get it. But there are other opportunities and other ways to do that. And when you say elderly, it's to me there's a couple of things. One, it just popped into my head. Clint Eastwood says,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
"Don't let the old man in."
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing this. And then number two, people ask me, "Well, how do you continue to stay in such good shape at 74 years old?" And it's easy. It's mind over mattress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If the mattress beats you, man, you're a wimp.
Yeah. We just sat down with an old logger the other day, and he'd been roughed up. He got thrown by a cow recently and broke his neck. It messed him up bad. And he said, he was, after he luckily got out of Harborview and stuff, and he was able to still function physically. He said, it's going to hurt no matter if you're sitting in that chair or if you're out there doing something. So you might as well be doing something.
Yeah.
That was such a great piece of advice.
Yep.
Let's go back to talking about that vote and the price of everything. There's a few things in Washington State that we have. For a long time, we had some of the richest people in the world living here. We have our tax revenue is like, what, 36 billion, I think I looked at. And it seems like when it looks to I'll call it your opponent's plan, is I keep seeing it's like, oh, we want to put these government programs. We want to, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll get these houses built. Well, those are all programs that require tax revenue, right? And a lot of them don't pan out. What I guess ideas do you have, or I would say plans or policies for your administration to be more efficient with the tax revenue, so that the citizens of Washington are getting, some value back into their life that helps with those things?
Well, I think first, people need to realize that the budget, the state budget, has doubled in the last 12 years. Just in 12 years, doubled. The Attorney General's office budget has doubled. He started out with 400 lawyers 12 years ago. He now has 800 lawyers. Now, he's hired 400 more attorneys, and we've lost over 1,000 cops in Washington State. His answer then isn't to get rid of 400 attorneys and use that money to hire cops. His answer is keep the 800 attorneys, my doubled budget, and then I'm going to give a $100 million grant to police chiefs and sheriffs to hire cops. Well, it's not about money. Cops become cops because they want to help people. They want to make a difference. And you can badmouth cops. You can think the worst of cops because that's what society has sort of twisted our thinking on today. 99.9% of those police officers that are out there they just want to help.
Yeah.
That's why they got into the job. They just want to make a difference. It's a passion. It's a calling. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example, another story. I was the sheriff. I was asked to come and speak to a group up on Broadway in downtown Seattle to get an endorsement. Now, back then it was the LGBTQ community, and about 20 or so people in the room. It was my daughter's birthday, the 16th or 17th birthday, and I went anyway. So I show up in uniform, sit down, we have this conversation. The leader says, now we've all agreed to be cordial and respectful, and we know we're going to disagree on some issues, but it's great that the sheriff showed up tonight to have a conversation. And so I sat down and answered about 8 or 9 questions. We get to one lady, she asked the question, and I gave the answer. She was unhappy, got angry, and the moderator steps in, calms her down, tells me to move on to the next, tells the next woman to ask a question. She starts, and I thought about it for some reason, and I said, to the moderator, can we just go back to this person just for a quick second? And I said, I know you and I disagree on this, but I want to make sure, it doesn't matter if we disagree or not.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you understand that when this meeting ends and we all get up and we walk out the door and we're on the street, if any one of you has your life threatened, I will sacrifice my life for you.
That's the truth.
And you could have heard a pin drop in that room because it was true.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that's what cops will do. That's the same thing a soldier does when he or she goes to war. They're ready to sacrifice their life for our freedom. Those cops are out there ready to step in the middle of it to protect the citizenry. So the budget, if you want to hire police officers, we got to start looking at first at the waste. We lost $1 billion. Somehow our government lost $1 billion worth of COVID money. They can't find it. What happened to $1 billion? Are you kidding me? We discovered, the auditor discovered, that at least one employee has pilfered nearly $1 million over a period of 5 or 6 years, whatever time frame it's been. And the statement that the auditor makes is that I'm afraid that this is not the only instance. So I think there's a lot of wasted money, a lot of money, there's a lot of programs that are being that are
extorted or something? Or?
Well, I think if you look at homelessness, there's another $1 billion spent and not a change in a homeless situation. In fact, it's gotten worse. So we're talking now over $2 billion that could go.
Yeah, that's an insane amount of money.
Yeah, and that's just a couple of examples. So when they say that we need to raise taxes, we don't have, as I said last night in the debate, we don't have a budget problem. We're just spending money, and we don't know where it's going.
Yeah. So I was looking at a few things while I was preparing for this, because I love what you touched on about the homelessness. You've been involved in crime most of your life. Homelessness, drug addiction, violent crime, and even healthcare is tied to mental health. How could we develop an educational system that, I guess, feeds the starving minds of children to maybe help them overcome, mental health issues and find a drive or a passion?
We used to be top in the nation, one of the top states in the nation when it comes to our education system. We are now behind Mississippi, and ranked among the lowest in our quality of education. That doesn't mean the teachers are bad. that just means our money is being misplaced. And that's the point I was trying to make, where my opponent's making the claim that I said that I want to reduce teachers' pay, which I never said. What I said is we need to take a look at where our education dollars are being spent and how they're being spent. And one of the first things we need to do is to talk to teachers and say, how do you see the future of education? They're the ones doing the job. I don't think that the governor, I mean, I've never been a teacher, although cops have teaching moments. Every adult
I love that.
who's raised a kid, right, or a grandparent or great-grandparent has had opportunities to teach. But I've never been a teacher all day, every day. And so part of what I've heard around the state from almost every profession is that we've not had a seat at the table. And maybe the unions, the teachers' union, the leadership has had a seat at the table. But have the teachers? I would make an effort to go to different school districts around the state and I want to sit down with the people that are doing the work. And then we say, where do we go from here? And once we start getting some clear ideas from them, then you can start to restructure. But I really think we need to do some. We need to give people choice. So right now it's just top line stuff. So the first thing you got to do is give people the choice where to send their kids to school. I mean, if they want to go to charter schools, if they want to homeschool, if they want to send them to public school, all of those options have to be the highest quality education that we can provide, and we got to figure out a way to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing is that there are in the 50s when I went to school, people with dyslexia. So two of my brothers have it, sister has it. You were, if you stood up and tried to read in the first grade and couldn't pronounce the words correctly, you were laughed at, and the teachers thought you were stupid. So you were slow, you're dim-witted. Now they learn what dyslexia is. So we need to recognize that there are disabilities.
I love that.
There's really not disabilities,
Yep, I love
but
that.
they're different talents. Because what I found with my dyslexia is that I think it's what made me a fairly good detective, is that you tend to look at problems and ask questions that people may not even. In fact, when I ask the question, somebody might look at me and go, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But then 6 months later, we'll finally get there, and then they go, oh yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I've had so many experiences in my life where I will, I've been in like automation. I've done all kinds of stuff because I'm very intrigued about the world, but where people are like, no. And then, it's like, it's because they don't think the way you do. And but in those moments when you hash it out, there's some sort of respect that gets built for one another, because you learn, okay, this person thinks this way and this person thinks this way, and you come to a conclusion, whoever has the right answer. So we
all learn differently.
Yeah, we all learn differently.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that you want to create an education system that builds opportunity for every different learning type to be able to flourish.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to do. You can't.
Oh yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, but I think you have to. At least teachers I know today are very sophisticated in looking at students and watching how they write, watching how they read, and talk and interact with students. They can readily recognize their learning styles and maybe where their weaknesses and strengths are. We need to help the teachers with the tools they need. They don't feel safe in school. That's the other issue that I think that we need to address. We've got to bring back school resource officers. That does a couple of things.
Yeah.
One, it makes the parents and the students feel like, okay, my kids are safe at school.
Yeah.
If I'm a child, I feel safe at school. In fact, then it also begins to break down that barrier between cops and the community, because kids begin to understand and learn that cops are really, moms and dads.
Yeah. So do you know Sheriff Bob Songer? He's Klickitat County Sheriff. He was like our third episode. He was one of the detectives with Wesley Allen Dodd.
I know him, but not well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had him in here. My family lives in Klickitat County, my grandparents and my mom. And he talked about that where, with gun rights and things like that with the 1639, how he, wasn't going to uphold some of it, because he was elective sheriff and he felt that they went against the constitutional rights. But he brings up a point in there about when you create this is what he was, I think, getting to, is when you create these gun-free zones where there's nobody there with a gun, you've just created a soft target for somebody that's wanting to do bad against, somebody, or a group of kids or a group of people in general. I'm sure as a police officer and a sheriff and everything, do you have ideas of how to help that scenario or for Washington State?
Yes. Here, so like last night I asked the question, how did we get here?
Yeah.
In the first place. So when you apply that question really to every problem, it helps to clarify really what the answer might be, because you can't solve the problem if you don't know how it was created in the first place.
Yeah.
So when I look at this, the knee-jerk reaction is ban guns.
Yeah.
That's not going to solve gun crime. So we got here because we took our eye off the real problem of gun crime, and we shifted it over to banning guns. And they're two separate. This does not apply to this problem over here. So if you want to stop gun crime, you have to hold people accountable who are committing crimes with guns.
Mm-hmm.
And back when I was the sheriff, we had a program called Violent Crimes Task Force in King County. And we were chosen as one of 10 safe cities. We were the only county, but it was called 10 safe cities in the nation. So one sheriff's office, 9 cities, major cities, Fort Wayne, L.A., those with the highest crime rate. And that was a Clinton Gore initiative. It was Vice President Gore's initiative. I still have the letter hanging on my office wall at home, congratulating the sheriff's office on their fight against gun crime. And gangs were a big thing back then. So that morphed into Project Safe Neighborhoods, and it was all about bringing the community together and recognizing that the laws in Washington State are strong enough. We have enough laws in Washington State to do the job to reduce gun crime. And a few years ago, they decided that Project Safe Neighborhoods was impacting certain communities more than others. And so they did away with Project Safe Neighborhoods. What happened? The murder rate has doubled, and they've legalized fentanyl.
Yeah.
They've legalized other drugs instead of helping the people, because you spoke about mental illness earlier. Mental illness, sometimes it's mental illness. People are on the street with that first, and then they become drug addicts. Sometimes you become a drug addict, and then the mental illness comes. So most often than not, you'll find people who are downtown have both problems, and so you've got to address both of those. But what we've been doing is enabling the gun crime problem to continue, because we're not addressing and holding people accountable and responsible for their actions. And 2, we've legalized products that cause mental illness.
Yeah.
And they have access to guns.
Yeah, they cause irrational behavior for sure.
So here we are. So the answer to that is you can't enable people to harm themselves. They're not making rational decisions when you're mentally ill or high on drugs.
Yeah.
And fentanyl it's not really, you don't get addicted to fentanyl. It kills you.
Yeah.
It's a poison. And so instead of giving them what they call, and I forget the exact name, a survivor's kit in Seattle, they hand these out to drug addicts on the street. And do you know what's in those? a syringe, a needle,
I knew they had like a free needle program or something
aluminum
like
foil, a pipe, and Narcan.
that.
That they hand those out, and then they so they can go shoot up and
Do you think
smoke
that's
crack.
do you think that's to because we talk about people having like alcohol and drug dependency. Do you think it's like do you think it's because they want those type of people that are more dependent on substances to be dependent on them as well, so they have the power over them? Or what do you what is it?
I think it's a twisted solution, twisted ideas that came to that brought them to a solution. That if we allow them to use drugs in a safe place, then they won't overdose and die, and we can maybe have them in one place and help them. But that's not how this works. You're not going to be able to get people off of drugs if you continue to allow them to use drugs. That makes no sense whatsoever. And so that's why the $1 billion spent by the state of Washington and more,
Yeah.
and another $780 million spent by Microsoft in 1 year. I asked Brad Smith, and he said it was wasted money. You know why? Because they provided housing. That's all they did.
Yeah.
So no social services,
Yeah.
no mental health assistance, no drug counseling, none of that. Zero.
When it comes to rehabs facilities, with Washington State, we have so much land and so much beautiful country. Is there any, I guess, policy or idea that's maybe come across your mind about creating these giant, maybe like multifaceted engineering, farming camps or something like that, where we can take people, give them a place to live and work and learn a skill, and maybe find a way to, I guess, fill their toolbox with things that can allow them to be no longer homeless, dependent on drugs, and give them a chance to get into society and be a providing individual?
So we already have a couple of organizations, well, at least 3 that I know of, that are already involved in processes like that. So,
Okay.
for example, the Union Gospel Mission, they don't have a huge farm or anything like that, but they have a facility in Seattle, personal walk-in. Mostly they serve men. Young man will walk in, I need help. I finally reached rock bottom. I need some help. They say, okay, but you got to be clean and sober, and you can stay here. And this is the first floor, but you're going to have responsibilities, and you're not going to use drugs or alcohol. And that's 2 week. It usually takes them 2 weeks to kind of get
Yeah.
their bearings. If you make it through that, they put you up on the second floor. Now we're talking 3-4 months on the second floor. And now they're beginning to teach you things like there are rules that you have to go by.
Yeah.
When you get up in the morning, the light bulb's going to come on. You have to get out of bed. You make your bed. You mop the floor. You clean the bathroom, and then you go to your therapy classes.
Okay.
And then we start to train. And this whole thing with the schedule, that's the beginning of job therapy, because you learn that in the morning you have to get up and go to work when the light bulb comes
Yeah.
on, and at night the light bulb goes off and it's time to eat dinner and go to sleep. So on the third floor, you now are employed, and you can leave
cool.
and come back, and you can stay for as long as you want. And usually they say the stay is about 6 to 8 months. And eventually what happens is then they are able to get their own apartment, or they hook up with a friend, they get an apartment, or they get reconnected with family members and they move in back with them, because a lot of family members will say, I'm done.
Yeah.
You're out of here. So because they get ripped off, so they can buy drugs. They'll break
Right.
into their mom and dad's
Yeah.
house and steal, or their uncle's house. But that's a very successful program. Salvation Army, very successful program, similar to Union Gospel. And there's another organization called The More We Love that's out there working with people in the real estate business,
Okay.
finding buildings that they can house people, But the key is it's not about housing.
Yeah.
And that's been the mistake that we've made. So King County, Seattle, is paying about $350,000 a month in lease payments to a totally vacant, rundown, beat-up hotel in Renton, right off of 167. It was leased by King County to house the homeless, with no rules, no therapy, no social services, zero. It was just, you're here in the apartment.
Yeah. That blows
And they just tore the place apart. So now it's all boarded up and we're paying for it.
I didn't think about this until you just said that, because it's like homelessness. So they just take home list and they're like, oh, we give them home. It's like such a simple.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. The homelessness is just a result of many other issues. I appreciate you bringing that up because I've always been curious about that because, obviously my daughter, very empathetic. She hates it when we see somebody homeless. We've picked up a blanket from our house and taken it to somebody before because it bothered her all the way home.
Yeah.
So I think most people they want the fix and the cure and they feel bad. And I think that I love that you have that empathy.
Well,
and
the thing
passion
is you
towards
have
it.
to get to the point where there are people that can't make the decision for themselves. And there's a law in Washington State that allows you to involuntarily commit someone.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to do that. Or, you know what? Arrest. Arrest is a rock bottom. Sometimes the criminal justice system, I know this from experience, is the gateway into help.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, Sheriff Bob Songer also said he had people come after him later on and thank him.
Yep.
Which I'm sure that you've experienced that. Okay, 2 things I want to ask you before we go. Technology advancement helped you catch the Green River Killer. And I love that you had the foresight to know that was coming and save the DNA. AI, big buzz. I use a lot of AI and to clean up things and do work. Have you thought about using AI for like data modeling and I would say like impact projection and things like that in your administration? Because you can collect so much data off so much different demographics.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that at all, or is that something?
Yeah. Well, not that specifically, but I am. So I look at technology from my experience. Okay, so I go back to 1982. No computers and no DNA. It was just blood typing. So we held that evidence, hoping that someday we'd find somebody. Now Ridgeway, when we swabbed him, he was a non-secretor, so we could not get a blood type from him. So we may have had a blood type, but we couldn't match.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is no technology, no science that helped us to 1982. But fast forward to 2001, you come to DNA, and it's actually in the late 90s, DNA comes in, and it can pinpoint one person. Fast forward even further, it took 6 months to figure out, once we submitted the evidence, to identify him. And now today, so you can get my DNA off of that plastic.
We'll find out who your cousin is.
Yeah, I know who my cousins are. But no, I mean, you had to have a swab or blood type to get DNA even. And now and you had to pluck the hair to get the root to get DNA.
Yeah.
Now it's just it's anything. I mean, it's spit. I don't smoke, but you can take a cigarette, toss a cigarette, and you can get the DNA from the. So when I look at electric cars, for example, and plastic. We were back in the day. We switched everything from glass to plastic because why? It was environmentally friendly. Yeah. What have we discovered? Plastic is not environmentally friendly. So they're outlawing plastic bags and plastic wrappers, and we're still using some plastic bottles. But we think we know science, is my point. We think we know where it's going, and we think we know the best. It's like we're saying right now electric cars is the deal. Yeah. I don't think electric cars are going to be the car of the future, or the power of the future. I think it's going to be something we're not even thinking about today. Maybe it's plasma energy. maybe
Yep.
it's whatever, but
I gotta bring this up. I've talked about this with people because I used to be in power production, renewable. I was in renewable energy when I met you before, and I say this about people's cars. It's like, and also just the world in general. And I could be wrong. This is just my theory, but you have to have a balance in producers and consumers. You have to have something that produces. You have to have enough producers to supply to the consumers. An electric car is a consumer. A gas car is a power producing device. And that's the difference I see amongst those two. You have one that strictly consumes, it does not self-generate like a gas engine. And I completely agree with you. Loading the grid. And we're loading the grid with data centers right now too.
Well,
So we're gonna
it's just like when you want to rip out 4 dams and then you want to make electric ferries. I always to paint the picture, I go, okay, look, we're going to have to get 25 guys to carry the plug from the ferry and stick it into the city of Seattle, and black out Seattle for half an hour while the ferry charges up. But we can't all of a sudden, as I said last night, we can't all of a sudden say we're going to stop doing this and we're going to start doing that. We have to transition into the new world, into the new energy. So back to the AI question, to me, we have to be real smart about this because everybody sees the danger of AI. Everybody sees the benefit of AI. And so there has to be a very smart, logical plan as we move forward as AI develops.
Yeah, I like that answer. I like the way that your foresight is so I'd say in depth. Like you don't remove opportunity just because you don't understand it. You let it play out. I think that's excellent.
You have to talk to the people that are in that world too. Because I'm not an expert in AI, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. It's all new.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people that really know where this is going yet.
I can tell you that they're preparing for it big time. I work in data centers, so I can tell you it's coming, and they're putting a lot of money into it. So I'm sure the lobbyists will be playing into that too. Mm-hmm. One thing, since we're getting to the end of the time, one thing I always ask people before we head out is if you could give just a couple words of wisdom to a younger generation, maybe somebody the age of your grandkids or something like that, something of value that you've held true to yourself through your life that's helped you, what would you share with us?
Oh man, I think the number one thing that has brought me through, I've been we haven't even talked about half the stuff that's happened
maybe we'll get
in my life, but it's my faith, and to me you have to have there's a God.
Yeah.
And you have to have faith in God. And if in this country you have the freedom to define God however you want to. And that's between you and God.
Yeah.
I happen to be a Christian, and that has served me well through my entire life. And secondly, those who are not inclined to believe that way somehow find it in yourself to respect people enough to hear and listen to different ideas. You don't always have to agree, So if you're a Democrat, have the courtesy and the respect to listen to a Republican. If you're a Republican, the same goes for you.
Yeah.
Have the courtesy and respect just to listen to the opposing ideas. You will learn more yourself, and I think you'll find that we probably agree a lot more than we think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was looking over bringing you in here because Washington are just blue, but a lot of the population is, and you're such a unique candidate in your life experience, which you can go back and look that you've voted for Democrats as a Republican,
Mm-hmm.
as a congressman. You voted for, is it John Kerry? I love that. I love that about you. Because I think I believe that I think similar to you in that way, because I feel like we're all in this together. I don't play the Super Bowl competition football one side or the other. My neighbors or my friends are Democrats, and I love them just the same as I love,
Yeah.
anybody else, and I wish the best for them. So I love that about you, that you are bipartisan. You stay true to your values. I love that.
It just goes back to the first part of our conversation, and that we respect people because they're people.
Yeah.
Not because they're black or brown or white or gray or green or Democrat or Republican or whatever. They're people. They are creations of God.
Yeah, I love that. Just one last thing I want to say. What I appreciate about your faith, I hear that. How many times has that been said? That probably 10 out of 13 times. That's the answer we get, is faith. And I love that. So I'm testing that to see how long we can go with that. I want to say that I appreciate that about you, because I think if that's the values that you've held true to you in your advice, I think your faith has probably saved a lot of people's lives because you chose that path. I think in your life as law enforcement and all the choices you made, I think I just really think that that's probably impacted far wider than you think. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
about
the thing about being a faithful person, and I said this last night too. I'm not running for this office to push people into my religion, but again, you lead by example. So if you just treat people with respect, they're going to go, there's something different about that guy. Wonder what he's thinking.
Yeah.
And he's a Christian. Well, that could be one thing. Maybe he's just a nice guy. That could be the other thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's not so nice and he's a really good actor. That's
Yeah.
another thing. I mean, it just go on and on. But I really just think it goes back to, if you really start out with the premise that everyone is created equal, then that's why I'm not big on titles. If somebody asks me, should I call you sheriff? Should I call you congressman? No.
I'm just Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only my friends can call me Dave. That's what I always tell them.
Well, my brothers and sisters, I shouldn't say this, used to call me Davy.
Oh, yeah.
That was my growing up name.
Yeah. In my family, they call me Little David, even though I'm the tallest one out of all the Davids. You believe it or not, my uncle, stepdad, and my little brother's name's David.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm the only.
Yeah.
I'm the only Dave.
So it's wild, yeah. But just to finish this up, I really appreciate you taking your time to come sit with us. And I appreciate you beyond just your time and everything else you do. I know that you're out here doing the fight for the Washington State citizens, and I think that's just such a huge choice to make, and that you obviously have lived a life where you're able to take on that leadership role and understand the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, but you can't. It's not. It's about a team.
Yeah.
It's about having a team. I couldn't do this by myself. I just, like the Green River case, people say Dave Reichert's taking credit for that. No, my face just happens to be the face of the case, but it was a whole team.
Yeah.
Right now I'm running, for governor because I have 3 kids. I have 6 grandkids. I have 5 great-grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild on the way. And it's about our team working together to make this a better place for my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and your kids, and everybody else's kids.
Well, make sure you tell your team, who's been awesome in communication, very nice to visit with. You tell them if we thank them, and if you need anything from us, you're more than welcome to come back anytime. I'd like to, Phil, if you ever want to come sit down and talk about life as a firefighter, I'd love to have you in here.
Yeah, he's got words of wisdom.
Yeah, well, we got a chair for him. So yeah, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Yep.